"Rebecca, we need to discuss the CTO announcement," Marcus said, not even looking up from his MacBook as I entered our home office in our Palo Alto mansion. He was reviewing what looked like organizational charts, crossing out my name with red ink like I was already gone. 9 years. 9 years of funding his dreams with my family's venture capital fortune, and he delivered this news with the same tone he'd used to order takeout. "The board voted unanimously for Jessica Chen," he continued, finally glancing up with those gray eyes that once made my heart skip. "Fresh perspective, you understand. She's got the innovation mindset we need for the next phase." I stood there in my silk pajamas, having just returned from dropping our son Tyler at his private school in Menlo Park, watching my husband casually demolish everything I'd built alongside him. "Nothing personal, Becca," he added, using the nickname that now felt like a slap. "It's just business evolution." I understood perfectly. That's why I smiled, nodded, and waited until his Tesla Model S disappeared down our tree-lined driveway before I began systematically destroying everything he'd built with my family's money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Silicon Valley, where disruption was religion and old money was often disguised as innovation. Marcus loved to tell the press how he'd bootstrapped NexTech Solutions from nothing, a garage startup that became a $200 million company through pure vision and determination. What he conveniently omitted was that the garage belonged to my family's Menlo Park estate, and every major funding round had been orchestrated through my trust fund connections. I walked to my real office, the one Marcus didn't know about, hidden behind a false wall in our wine cellar. My hands remained steady as I opened the concealed door with my biometric scanner. Inside, 3 monitors displayed the true architecture of NexTech's funding structure. 18 separate investment entities, each appearing independent on paper, but all flowing from the Morrison family fortune. Pacific Ridge Ventures, Golden Gate Capital, Sierra Innovation Fund, Redwood Trust Associates. All of them mine, managed through shell corporations and family trusts dating back 4 generations. Together, they comprised 64% of NexTech's total capitalization. Marcus thought he'd been courting diverse Silicon Valley investors. In reality, every pitch deck, every term sheet, every late-night negotiation had been theater. I was the only investor that mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler's school. Parent-teacher conference rescheduled to Thursday. Tyler mentioned his father might not attend due to travel. Travel. Marcus had been taking a lot of business trips lately. According to his calendar, he was supposed to be in Austin this week for a partnership summit. But his credit card statements, which I quietly monitored through our shared accounts, showed charges from the St. Regis in San Francisco and dinners at high-end restaurants he claimed to hate. I pulled up the consulting invoices that had been bothering me for months. J. Chen Strategic Consulting, $850,000 over 8 months for market analysis and innovation strategy. All approved by Marcus using his CEO discretionary fund, a fund that existed only because my great-grandmother had insisted on executive flexibility during the company's incorporation. Jessica Chen, 25 years old, Stanford MBA, specializing in disruptive technologies and organizational transformation. Her LinkedIn profile showed her posing in front of various tech companies, always professionally dressed, always perfectly positioned for maximum impact. I called my sister Caroline next. She answered on the first ring from her law office in downtown San Francisco. "He gave my position to his consultant," I said without preamble. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. "The young one? Jessica? You know about her?" "Becca. Everyone knows about her. She's been at every industry event with him for months. They're not exactly subtle." My stomach dropped. How long has everyone known? Does it matter? What matters is what you do now. Come to my office. Bring everything. But I couldn't wait. I accessed NexTech's real financial statements, the ones only Marcus, our CFO David Kim, and I could see. The company was leveraged heavily, floating on credit lines, guaranteed by what the board believed were diverse institutional investors. Every guarantee traced back to Morrison money. We were the invisible foundation supporting Marcus's glass tower in the clouds. Tyler called during his lunch break, his 12-year-old voice bright with excitement. "Mom, I got an A on my coding project. Mr. Patterson said it was the most advanced work he's seen from a 6th grader. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I had to sound normal. What did you program? A game where the hero has to solve puzzles to save her kingdom. She's really smart and uses strategy instead of just fighting. The parallel wasn't lost on me. She sounds like a very wise hero. Yeah, she reminds me of you, Mom. Dad always says you're the smartest person he knows. Past tense, apparently. After hanging up, I stared at the framed photo on my hidden desk. Our wedding day at the Rosewood Sandhill. My father walking me down the aisle, his expression mixing joy with something I now recognized as concern. He'd pulled me aside that morning. The Chens are ambitious people, he'd said, meaning Marcus's family. Make sure you always protect what's yours. I'd thought he was being old-fashioned. Now I understood he'd seen what I'd been blind to for 9 years. Caroline arrived at our house within an hour, still in her courtroom attire but with the focused intensity that made her one of San Francisco's top corporate lawyers. "Show me everything," she commanded. I led her to my hidden office, watching her face darken as she reviewed the investment portfolios, the shell company structures, the consulting invoices. "My God, Rebecca," she breathed. "You've been the puppet master this entire time." I preferred to think of myself as a silent partner. Silent partners get equity and recognition. You've been an invisible benefactor, funding someone else's empire. She was right. Every major decision, every strategic pivot, every crisis that Marcus had navigated successfully, I'd been the one providing the resources, the connections, the financial backing to make it possible. "What did Mom say when you structured the Pacific Ridge Fund?" Caroline asked, pointing to specific transactions. She said I was maintaining the family tradition admirably. Caroline laughed bitterly. The tradition of brilliant women standing behind mediocre men. I thought about that tradition. My great-grandmother, who'd secretly managed the family's early tech investments while my great-grandfather took credit for their wealth. My grandmother, who'd identified the potential of semiconductors in the 1960s while my grandfather played golf. My mother, who'd built our venture capital empire while my father attended charity galas. Now me, funding Marcus's startup dreams while he gave my position to a woman who probably wasn't even born when I started working in tech. My phone rang. David Kim, our CFO, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Rebecca, we need to talk. Not on the phone. Can you meet me at the office?" 20 minutes later, I sat across from David in NexTech's executive conference room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "How long have you known about Jessica?" I asked quietly. David's shoulders sagged. "Months. I tried to warn you indirectly, but you seemed so focused on the technical roadmap that I thought... You thought I was oblivious. I thought you were choosing not to see it." He pulled out his tablet, showing me expense reports. The Austin trip? They're both there. Same hotel, adjoining rooms that Marcus personally booked. The evidence was damning, not just infidelity, but a complete reconstruction of our company's leadership with me written out of the narrative. "There's something else," David continued. "Jessica's been having private meetings with some of our board members, strategic planning sessions that aren't on any official calendar." "What kind of strategic planning?" "The kind that involves discussing transitions in leadership, the kind that uses words like fresh blood and modernizing operations." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about replacing me as CTO. This was about erasing me entirely from the company I'd built. That evening, I attended Tyler's school science fair alone. Marcus had texted that his Austin meetings were running late, but his location services showed him at a Michelin-starred restaurant in San Francisco's Mission District. Tyler's project on renewable energy storage won first place. As I applauded with the other parents, I noticed several of them giving me sympathetic looks. The tech community in the Bay Area was small. Word traveled fast. "Congratulations, Tyler," said Jennifer Walsh, another parent whose husband worked at a competing firm. "Rebecca, I heard about the CTO announcement. I'm sure you'll land somewhere amazing." The assumption that I'd been fired stung more than I expected. These people saw me as someone who'd been discarded, not someone who'd been betrayed. Driving home through the winding roads of the peninsula, I passed NexTech's headquarters in Redwood City. The The building Marcus loved to photograph for his LinkedIn posts. The gleaming campus he described as his monument to innovation. Built with my money, funded by my connections, sustained by my family's wealth. That night, I cooked Tyler's favorite dinner while my mind calculated withdrawal sequences and impact assessments. Marcus texted that he'd be home late, another emergency meeting. I didn't bother responding. Later, alone in my hidden office, I opened a new spreadsheet. 18 investment accounts, $73 million in total commitments, 64% of NexTech's operational capital. One by one, I began drafting withdrawal notices. Not to send yet, just to prepare. Each one carefully worded, legally bulletproof, timed for maximum impact. The quarterly investor showcase was held at the Fairmont San Francisco, where NexTech was presenting to 400 of Silicon Valley's most influential players. I stood beside Marcus in my designer dress, playing the role of supportive wife while he worked the room with practiced charm. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice carrying perfectly across the ballroom. "Before we discuss our roadmap for global expansion, I want to introduce someone who's been instrumental in our recent strategic initiatives. Please welcome our Chief Technology Officer, Jessica Chen." She emerged from the crowd like she'd been waiting for her cue. 25 years old, wearing a black power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her confidence filled the space in a way that made other women step back instinctively. "Thank you, Marcus," Jessica said, her voice carrying that particular blend of authority and accessibility that Silicon Valley prized. "I'm thrilled to be leading NexTech's technical vision into our next chapter of growth." She knew exactly how to hold the microphone, how to angle her body for the photographers, how to pause for effect. But what caught my attention were the smaller details. The way she automatically reached for Marcus's coffee cup when he gestured. How she knew to signal the bartender for his specific drink preference when they approached the bar. These weren't things you learned in a professional capacity. When I extended my hand to greet her, she held it a beat too long, her dark eyes studying me with the clinical interest of someone examining a problem to be solved. "Mrs. Chen," she said, deliberately using my married name. "Marcus speaks so highly of your support over the years." Support, not partnership, not contribution. Support. "Miss Chen," I replied, matching her measured tone. "I look forward to seeing how you implement the technical architecture we've developed." Marcus interjected quickly, his hand finding my lower back in a gesture that felt more like control than affection. "Jessica's been revolutionary in her approach to our cloud infrastructure scaling. The cloud infrastructure I'd designed. The scaling solutions I'd architected." But I smiled and nodded, playing my role one final time. Later, when I quietly asked our head of security about Jessica's hiring process, he suddenly became very interested in his phone screen. "I wouldn't know about that, Mrs. Chen. Mr. Chen handles all executive appointments directly." The following week, I decided to surprise Marcus by organizing his home office while he was at the TechCrunch Disrupt conference in Austin. He'd been complaining about clutter, and I thought I might find the transition documents he'd promised to review with me. I searched through every drawer, every filing cabinet, every carefully organized folder. No contracts, no transition plans, no documentation of the CTO role we'd supposedly been discussing. What I found instead painted a different picture entirely. Hotel receipts from the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay for nights when Marcus claimed to be working late at the office. Dinner charges from restaurants in Carmel that I'd never been to. A receipt from Tiffany & Co. dated 6 weeks ago for a necklace I'd never received. Tyler wandered in while I sat surrounded by evidence of my husband's deception. "Mom, are you okay? You look upset?" I forced myself to smile. "Just organizing Dad's paperwork." He perched on the arm of Marcus's leather chair. "Dad's new business partner, Jessica, is really cool. She taught me how to optimize my game code yesterday." My hand stilled on the papers. "When did you meet Jessica?" "After school. Dad picked me up because you were at your dentist appointment, remember? She was in the car. They were going over some presentation on his laptop." The dentist appointment. 2 weeks ago. Marcus had volunteered to pick up Tyler, claiming he wanted to spend more father-son time together. "Did Dad introduce you properly?" "Kind of. He seemed nervous, actually. Jessica asked about my coding project and said she'd love to help me make it more sophisticated. Tyler paused. She smells like Dad's new cologne. The expensive cologne I'd noticed 3 months ago. When I'd asked about it, Marcus said he'd discovered it at a hotel in Seattle and liked it enough to buy a bottle. But he'd been to Seattle 6 months ago, and the scent was definitely newer than that. Did Jessica seem friendly with Dad? Tyler considered this with the serious expression he inherited from my side of the family. Yeah, but like they finished each other's sentences, like how you and Aunt Caroline do. That Saturday, the Tech Innovation Awards at the Computer History Museum provided the perfect stage for public humiliation. Caroline found me during the networking reception, her expression grim. "We need to talk," she said, guiding me toward the terrace overlooking the museum's sculpture garden. "Have you seen the industry blogs lately?" She handed me her phone, showing a TechCrunch article titled Power Couples, Silicon Valley's Next Generation Leaders. The photo showed Marcus and Jessica at last month's founders' dinner, her hand on his shoulder as they posed with other tech executives. "They're listed as a couple," Caroline said quietly. "The article talks about their shared vision for transforming enterprise technology." I scrolled through the comments, finding dozens of congratulations and speculation about their partnership. Several people mentioned how refreshing it was to see young leadership in tech. "Rebecca," Caroline touched my arm gently. "Everyone's talking about them. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." I handed back her phone, something crystallizing inside me. How long have I been the laughingstock of Silicon Valley? You're not a laughingstock. You're a victim of fraud. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 11 p.m., I told Marcus I was going to Caroline's to discuss Mom's 70th birthday plans. Instead, I drove to NexTech's headquarters. The building was mostly empty, except for the cleaning crew and security guards who'd known me for 9 years. They waved me through without question, assuming I was retrieving something from my office. The executive floor was dark, except for the corner conference room where light spilled through frosted glass. As I approached, I heard Jessica's laugh, bright and carelessly young. Through the glass doors, I could see them. Presentation slides glowed on the wall-mounted screen, but neither was looking at them. Jessica sat on the conference table, her legs swinging casually, while Marcus stood between her knees. His hands rested on her waist as she showed him something on her phone. The casual intimacy of it, the comfortable body language of people who'd long ago crossed professional boundaries, told me everything I needed to know. I stood there for a full minute, watching my husband with another woman, feeling something inside me transform from hurt into cold, calculated certainty. Then I pushed open the door. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions like a computer trying to process corrupted data. Surprise, guilt, panic, then finally settling on defensive irritation. "Rebecca, what are you doing here?" I could ask you the same question. Jessica slid off the table with fluid grace, not even pretending to look embarrassed. She smoothed her skirt and smiled at me with the confidence of someone who believed she'd already won. "We're preparing for Monday's board presentation," Marcus said, his voice carrying that particular Silicon Valley tone that made everything sound like a disruption. It's not what it looks like. The oldest lie in the world, delivered with the confidence of a man who'd forgotten I had a PhD in computer science and could recognize bullshit when I saw it. Behind him, the presentation slide showed next quarter's technical roadmap. I'd created that roadmap 3 weeks ago. I turned and walked out without another word, leaving Marcus mid-sentence in his pathetic explanation. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floors with metronomic precision, each step taking me further from any possibility of reconciliation. Behind me, I heard Marcus call my name once, then silence. Jessica's voice drifted after me, something about user interface optimization, as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I stood in the lobby of NexTech's headquarters, watching employees stream past me toward the all-hands meeting, where Marcus would announce the new leadership structure. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see the presentation setup, the board members taking their seats, Marcus adjusting his tie with the nervous energy of someone about to make history. Before we discuss our technical roadmap, His voice carried through the building's open architecture. "I'm excited to announce that Jessica Chen will be joining our executive team as Chief Technology Officer." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not because I was surprised. After last night, I knew this was coming. But because of how easily he said it. 9 years of my work, my strategic planning, my family's money building this company, dismissed in a single sentence. Applause erupted from inside the room. Through the glass walls, I could see hands coming together in celebration of my replacement. Board members standing, phones coming out to capture the moment, Jessica beaming as she accepted congratulations. When the doors opened and Marcus emerged with the leadership team, he saw me standing there. His step faltered for just a moment before he recovered, approaching me with the cautious gait of someone who knew they'd been caught. "Rebecca, I was going to tell you after the meeting." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "You just did." "Look, it's nothing personal." He actually said those words, standing there in his $5,000 suit that my trust fund had paid for. Jessica brings fresh energy. She's more aligned with our future vision. Our future vision. As if I hadn't been the one creating those visions, coding those prototypes, designing the technical architecture that made them possible. David Kim passed by us, and I caught the flash of pity in his eyes before he looked away. Behind him, several board members chatted excitedly about the new direction and innovative leadership. They all knew. Every one of them had sat in that room and applauded my replacement while knowing exactly whose money kept their equity valuable. I left without another word, my legs somehow carrying me to the parking garage, then to my car, then onto Highway 101. I found myself pulling into the parking lot of Stanford Shopping Center, where Tyler and I often went to browse the bookstore and get ice cream. Caroline met me at Pete's Coffee, having canceled her afternoon court appearances when I called her in tears. "That bastard," she said, pacing between tables while other customers gave us wide berth. "That ungrateful, cheating piece of..." She unleashed a string of expletives that would have made our grandmother faint. "I'll pull every penny our family has invested," she continued, already reaching for her phone. "Every single account. Let's see how his little girlfriend handles a company with no funding." She was already dialing when I stopped her. "We need to call Mom first." Caroline paused, her finger hovering over the screen. We both knew what that meant. Eleanor Morrison didn't do emotional reactions. She did strategic responses. Mom answered on the second ring as if she'd been expecting our call. Caroline put her on speaker, and I told the story coherently this time. The consulting fees, the secret relationship, the CTO announcement, everything. The silence that followed felt like judgment. "I see," Mom finally said, her tone arctic. "And you're just learning about this relationship now?" "There were signs," I admitted. I chose not to see them. "Yes," she said simply, "you did." Her disappointment cut deeper than Marcus's betrayal. She'd warned me in her way, all those careful questions about whether Marcus was treating me as an equal partner, the observations about how stressed I looked, the suggestions that I maintain more control over the family investments. She'd seen what I'd refused to acknowledge. "A Morrison woman doesn't crumble, dear," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of 4 generations. "We strategize. Come to the estate tomorrow morning. Bring Caroline and bring every financial document you have regarding NexTech solutions." 2 days later, I stood in my own backyard, watching Tyler's 13th birthday party slowly deflate like a punctured balloon. Marcus was 2 hours late. The ice cream cake was melting in the unseasonably warm October heat. Tyler kept checking the driveway, his disappointment visible in the slump of his shoulders. When Marcus's Tesla finally pulled into our circular driveway, my stomach dropped. Jessica Chen stepped out of the passenger side wearing designer jeans and a Stanford hoodie, looking like she belonged at a college reunion rather than a middle schooler's birthday party. "Sorry we're late," Marcus announced, as if bringing his mistress to our son's birthday was perfectly normal. Jessica and I had some urgent user experience issues to resolve. The backyard went silent. 12-year-olds stared at the woman who looked more like their older sister than a corporate executive. Parents exchanged glances. Tyler's face crumpled, then smoothed into a mask I recognized, the same one I wore when pretending everything was fine. My mother-in-law, Helen, who had spent 9 years making subtle comments about my family's tech money, actually walked over and put her arm around my shoulders. "Shameful," she murmured loud enough for others to hear. "Absolutely shameful." Jessica approached Tyler with a wrapped gift, her smile bright and completely tone-deaf to the situation. "Happy birthday, Tyler! Your dad told me you're into coding." The gift was a professional-grade mechanical keyboard, something so obviously inappropriate for a 13-year-old's birthday party that even Marcus should have noticed. But he was busy taking photos with his phone, his fingers already moving to post them on Instagram. I watched him type "family first" and wanted to throw his phone into our swimming pool. Tyler accepted the gift with polite confusion, looking between Jessica and me. His friends whispered behind their hands. 2 parents gathered their children and left early, citing forgotten appointments. Marcus remained oblivious, discussing cloud architecture with Jessica while standing next to the birthday cake. She laughed at something he said, her hand briefly touching his arm, and I saw Tyler notice. My son's eyes met mine across the yard, and in them I saw understanding dawning with the terrible clarity that comes too early to children of Silicon Valley executives. 3 days later, David Kim cornered me in the parking garage of a Whole Foods in Palo Alto. Our CFO looked around nervously before approaching, a manila folder clutched against his chest. "Rebecca, I'm resigning tomorrow," he said without preamble. "I can't watch this anymore." He thrust the folder into my hands. Inside were receipts, printouts, emails, a paper trail of betrayal dating back 8 months. Jewelry charges from Cartier that I'd never received, hotel bills for weekends when Marcus claimed to be at conferences, email threads between him and Jessica with timestamps from when he was supposedly in budget meetings. "There's more," David said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You funded everything. Every major contract, every product launch, every expansion. It all came from your family's accounts. The board knows it. Marcus knows it." He paused, seeming to gather courage for the final blow. "They laugh about it, Rebecca. In the executive meetings, they call you the silent benefactor and make jokes about how you don't even know what you're funding." His eyes filled with tears. "You deserve to know." David's folder sat on my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. I waited until Marcus's breathing deepened into his familiar snore before slipping out of bed and down to my hidden office. The house felt different in darkness, every shadow holding secrets I'd been too trusting to see. I started with the family accounts, pulling up dashboards I'd managed for 9 years. Morrison Trust, Pacific Ridge Ventures, Golden Gate Capital, Sierra Innovation Fund. Each one appeared separate on paper, independent entities investing in a promising startup. The truth was far simpler and more damaging. They were all ours, tentacles of the same family fortune. I traced each wire transfer, each investment round, each emergency loan that had saved NexTech from collapse. The numbers made my breath catch. $73 million over 9 years. Not a partnership, not a mutual investment. A one-way flow of Morrison money into Marcus's ambitions. My fingers moved across the keyboard with increasing speed, screenshotting everything. Bank statements, transfer confirmations, board resolutions that showed Marcus knew exactly where the money originated. He'd signed papers acknowledging Morrison Trust as the lead investor. He'd personally negotiated terms with Pacific Ridge Ventures, which was literally managed by my college roommate. The Sierra Innovation Fund alone had provided $12 million during the COVID expansion crisis 2 years ago. I remembered that night, Marcus pacing our bedroom, talking about bankruptcy, about losing everything. I'd made 4 phone calls, moved money from 3 family trusts, and by morning, NexTech had its lifeline. The press release had credited Marcus's brilliant navigation of market volatility and strategic partnership development. The strategic partner had been me, sitting in my pajamas at this same desk. Dawn crept through the windows as my documentation grew. Folder after folder of evidence showing that NexTech Solutions wasn't built on Marcus's genius. It was built on 4 generations of Morrison wealth, managed by me, credited to him. My coffee had long gone cold, but I barely noticed. For the first time in months, possibly years, I felt completely clear about what needed to happen. Caroline called at 7 a.m. "Can you meet me downtown?" not at the family firm, somewhere discreet. An hour later, I sat across from her in a conference room at Hartley & Associates, a law firm that specialized in corporate litigation and tech industry disputes. Caroline had already been busy. 3 lawyers sat with us, their expressions serious as they reviewed the evidence I'd compiled. "Show them what you showed me," Caroline said. I spread out the documentation, the 18 accounts, the $73 million in transfers, the paper trail showing Marcus's full knowledge of the source. The lawyers exchanged glances as they studied the documents. "Every contract has an immediate withdrawal clause," the lead attorney, Patricia Hartley, said after 30 minutes of silent reading. "Breach of fiduciary trust, misrepresentation of funding sources, violation of disclosure agreements. It's ironclad." "How quickly?" I asked. "24 hours notice is all that's legally required," she replied, pulling up a calendar on her tablet. "But if you want maximum impact." She paused, studying upcoming dates. "The next board meeting is in 72 hours. If you move before then, you control the narrative completely." Caroline reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "The entire family is behind you, Rebecca. Mom, me, even cousin Robert, and you know how he feels about family drama. There's something else," Patricia added, sliding another folder across the table. "We pulled precedents. Similar cases where family investors reclaimed funds from companies that violated trust agreements. In 4 cases, the investors didn't just withdraw. They demanded controlling interest as compensation for breach of contract." The possibility hung in the air like electricity before a storm, not just crippling NexTech, but taking it entirely. "Think about it," Caroline said, "but if you're going to move, it has to be now." That afternoon, Mom summoned me to the family estate in Atherton. The library hadn't changed since my childhood. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs that had belonged to my great-grandfather, the smell of old paper and family history. Portraits of 4 generations of Morrison women watched from the walls. My great-great-grandmother, who'd started with railroad investments. My great-grandmother, who'd survived the crash of 1929 by diversifying into emerging technologies. My grandmother, whose prescient investment in semiconductors had built our second fortune. "Your grandmother faced something similar once," Mom said, her fingers tracing the edge of a crystal paperweight that had sat on this desk for decades. Her business partner, Richard Sterling. They built a telecommunications company together in the 1970s. I knew the company. It had made our family's 3rd fortune before being acquired by AT&T. Richard forgot whose money had built the empire, Mom continued. Started making decisions without consultation. Started believing his own press about being a visionary. She stood, moving to a portrait I'd barely noticed before, a stern-faced man with calculating eyes. "That's Richard. He used to hang in our boardroom." "I don't understand. Why is his portrait here?" Mom smiled, the expression sharp as winter. "Because your grandmother didn't just withdraw support. She acquired his shares during the crisis that followed. The portrait came with his office furniture." She moved to an antique safe hidden behind a false panel. The documents she pulled out were dated 1978, but attached were modern amendments, clauses I'd never seen, powers I didn't know existed. "The family trust has override provisions," Mom explained, spreading out papers that looked like they'd been prepared by teams of lawyers. "If funds are being misused or misrepresented, the trustee, that's you, dear, can not only withdraw, but can claim damages, substantial damages." "Marcus doesn't know about these clauses." "Of course not. These are Morrison protections. He was never truly family, was he?" Her eyes gleamed with something that might have been pride or vengeance. "It's time to be a Morrison, Rebecca. Your grandmother would expect nothing less." That evening, I sat with Tyler at our kitchen table, helping him with his calculus homework. He was struggling with a problem about compound interest, ironically enough. "Mom," he said suddenly, pencil suspended over his worksheet, "Jessica says she and Dad are looking at houses together." My hands stilled on the calculator. "When did Jessica tell you this?" "Yesterday, when Dad picked me up from coding club. She was in the car again." He paused, his young face serious. "She said after some big announcement next month, they're going to get a place with a proper home office setup." The big announcement. The board meeting where they'd probably announce their engagement alongside Jessica's permanent appointment. She asked if I wanted to help design a gaming setup for my new room, Tyler continued, his voice carefully neutral. I said I already have a room. I pulled him into a hug, feeling him tremble slightly. You weren't being rude, sweetheart. You were being honest. Later, after Tyler was asleep, I found Marcus's laptop open in his study. He was getting careless, leaving it unlocked while he showered. The browser showed recently viewed pages. Real estate listings in Menlo Park. 7-bedroom houses with guest houses and home offices. The pre-approval letter was in Jessica's name, but the down payment source made my blood run cold. It was listed as executive compensation bonus, but the amount matched exactly what I was scheduled to inherit from my grandfather's trust next month. He wasn't just betraying our marriage. He was planning to steal from our son's future using money 4 generations of Morrison women had preserved and grown. I photographed every screen before clearing the browser history, leaving no trace of my discovery. At 3:33 a.m., 4 days later, Caroline's home office in Pacific Heights looked like a war room. She'd taken a week's leave from her corporate law practice, claiming a family emergency that wasn't entirely untrue. The 3 of us, me, Caroline, and our cousin Robert, who managed the family's venture capital arm, hadn't been united like this since Dad's funeral 5 years ago. Caroline had printed every contract, every investment agreement, every legal document connecting our family's money to NexTech solutions. They covered her entire dining table in neat rows, color-coded with sticky notes marking key clauses. Robert set up multiple laptops, one showing real-time market data, another displaying legal precedents, a third monitoring tech industry news feeds. 18 accounts, I said, laying out my own documentation in chronological order. 64% of NexTech's operating capital. We need to draft the withdrawal notices tonight. Each one has to be perfect, Robert said, pulling up a legal template on his screen. No room for challenge, no possibility of Marcus finding loopholes. Caroline stood over the contracts, reading glasses perched on her nose. The language has to trigger the immediate withdrawal clause, while documenting breach of fiduciary trust, misrepresentation of fund usage, violation of disclosure agreements. We worked in focused silence for 3 hours, crafting each notice with surgical precision. The Morrison Trust, Pacific Ridge Ventures, Golden Gate Capital, Sierra Innovation Fund. Each withdrawal had to stand alone legally while creating a cascade effect financially. Stagger them, Robert advised, looking at the timeline we'd mapped out. 9 to 9:20 a.m. If they all hit simultaneously, it could trigger automatic fraud detection systems. The banking algorithms might flag it as a cyber attack. Smart, Caroline agreed. Then her eyes lit up with something almost gleeful. We should copy the SEC on everything. Full transparency. Let them see exactly where Marcus's miracle growth came from. That's brilliant, Robert said. It prevents him from spinning this as a technical glitch or family dispute. The regulators will have questions. I thought about the implications. SEC involvement would make this public, would destroy any chance of reconciliation. But reconciliation had died the moment Marcus decided to steal my grandfather's trust fund for his girlfriend's house. The next afternoon, I sat across from David Kim at a small coffee shop in downtown Palo Alto, 3 blocks from NexTech's headquarters. He'd chosen the location, neutral territory where no one from the company would spot us. Thank you for meeting me, I said. David stirred his coffee slowly, his face drawn with exhaustion. I've wanted to say something for months. I've watched Marcus take credit for your algorithms, your product designs, your family's investments. The board knows the truth, but they're all getting rich off your family's money. No one wants to rock the boat. I pulled out my tablet, showing him the documentation I'd compiled, the $73 million in transfers, the 18 accounts, the withdrawal notices ready to deploy. His face grew paler with each slide. This would destroy NexTech overnight, he whispered. I leaned forward. Unless the board makes the right choice. What choice is that? Marcus steps down. Jessica is terminated. The board acknowledges the true source of NexTech's funding. I paused. You have one chance to be on the right side of this, David. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. My daughter's college fund is tied up in NexTech stock options. If you stand with Marcus when this happens, you'll lose everything. If you help me transition leadership properly, I'll ensure your position is protected. David nodded slowly. The board meeting is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Marcus is planning to formally announce his engagement to Jessica then, along with some major restructuring announcements. I know. I smiled. I won't be there. He looked confused, but I didn't elaborate. Let him wonder. That evening, I attended NexTech's annual company picnic at Shoreline Park. The perfect corporate wife, one last time. I'd made Tyler's favorite chocolate chip cookies from scratch and wore the sundress Marcus had bought me for our 7th anniversary, the one he said made me look like the woman he'd fallen in love with. Rebecca! Several employees greeted me warmly. They had no idea their paychecks were about to evaporate. Marcus hit a home run in the company softball game, and I cheered louder than anyone. Jessica was notably absent, probably preparing for tomorrow's big announcements. I mingled, laughed at programming jokes, took photos for the company newsletter. Every interaction felt like a goodbye. During the 7th inning stretch, Marcus jogged over, sweaty and grinning. "Thanks for coming, babe." Means a lot. Babe. He hadn't called me that in 3 years. Wouldn't miss it, I said, handing him a water bottle. Listen, about tomorrow's board meeting, I can't make it. Tyler has a college counseling appointment. The lie rolled off my tongue smoothly. I'd scheduled the appointment that morning, my alibi locked in place. That's fine, he said, looking relieved. It's just routine executive stuff anyway. Routine. Like destroying our marriage and stealing our son's inheritance. At dinner, I made his favorite meal, the exact one I'd cooked the night he'd proposed 10 years ago. Grilled salmon with asparagus risotto and roasted vegetables. Tyler chatted about his advanced placement computer science project while Marcus scrolled through his phone, occasionally grunting responses. This is incredible, Mom, Tyler said, savoring the salmon. What's the special occasion? No occasion. Just felt like cooking something nice. Marcus looked up from his phone briefly. It's good, he said, already typing again. The screen reflection in his glasses showed Jessica's name. I watched them both, memorizing this moment. Tyler's innocence, still unaware his world was about to shatter. Marcus's casual arrogance, texting his girlfriend while eating the meal I'd made with hands that would destroy him tomorrow. I love you both, I said suddenly, the words escaping before I could stop them. Tyler beamed and came around the table to hug me. Love you too, Mom. Marcus just nodded, already typing another message. Yeah, love you too, he said absently. That night, I waited until Marcus was showering to forward screenshots of his private emails to Patricia Hartley's secure server. Messages about his future plans with Jessica, about the house they'd put an offer on, about the transition timeline after her promotion. Evidence for the divorce that would follow tomorrow's financial catastrophe. When Marcus climbed into bed, I surprised us both by reaching for him. He responded eagerly, probably thinking about Jessica the entire time. Afterward, as he drifted off to sleep, I studied his face in the moonlight. The strong jawline I'd once found attractive, the lips that had promised to love and honor. The hands that would soon be signing resignation papers. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and walked to my hidden office one final time. The 18 withdrawal notices sat in my draft folder, scheduled to send between 9 and 9:20 a.m. I verified each one, checked the timestamps, confirmed the SEC copies were attached. My finger hovered over the confirmation button. Once I clicked this, there would be no going back. 10 years of marriage, 13 years together, Tyler's intact family. All of it would end with this click. I thought about Jessica's hand on Marcus's shoulder, about nothing personal, about the $73 million of my family's money funding his ego. I clicked confirm. The morning of the execution felt surreal in its normalcy. I made Tyler's lunch, packed his backpack for school, and kissed him goodbye at the bus stop while Marcus showered upstairs, completely unaware that his empire was about to crumble. By 7 a.m., I sat in my hidden office with coffee growing cold, watching 18 different account dashboards on my monitors. The withdrawal notices would begin sending in 2 hours. Marcus came downstairs at 7:30, adjusting his tie and humming some tune I didn't recognize. He looked confident, excited even, probably anticipating his big day of announcements. You're up early, he said, poking his head into what he thought was my craft room. "Couldn't sleep," I replied truthfully. "Big day today," he grinned, and for a moment I saw the ambitious graduate student I'd married. "The board's going to love what Jessica and I have planned for the global expansion." Jessica and I, not even pretending anymore. "I'm sure they will," I said. He grabbed his travel mug, the one Tyler had given him that said "World's Best Dad," and headed for the door. "Don't wait up tonight. Might be late celebrating." The door closed behind him with a satisfied thud. I listened to his Tesla pull out of our driveway, then returned to my screens. 8:47 a.m. Just over 10 minutes until the first notice would send. At 8:55, I pulled up NexTech's internal system using access codes David had quietly provided. The dashboard showed normal morning activity, emails flying, calendar invites updating, the board meeting starting in 5 minutes. 8:59. I thought of my grandmother's favorite quote, painted on driftwood that still hung in Mom's study. "Fortune favors the bold." 9 a.m. The first notice sent. Morrison Trust's $8.5 million vanished from NexTech's operational account. The withdrawal processed instantly. 9:02. Click. Pacific Ridge Ventures' $12 million disappeared from their product development fund. 9:05. Click. 2 more accounts withdrew simultaneously. By 9:08, I watched NexTech's internal system explode with alerts. Red warning boxes cascaded down the screen. Urgent, Morrison Trust withdrawing. Emergency, Pacific Ridge terminating agreement. Critical, multiple account closures detected. Through Tyler's old baby monitor that I'd never removed from our bedroom, a secret Marcus had forgotten about, I heard his phone start ringing at 9:10. He'd left it charging on his nightstand, probably planning to retrieve it after the meeting. It rang once, twice, went to voicemail, then immediately rang again. 9:12. Click. 3 more accounts emptied. The internal system showed chaos. Emergency emails fired off to every executive. The CFO's status went from in meeting to urgent, reviewing crisis. Board members' calendars suddenly blocked off for emergency financial review. 9:20. The final notice sent. 18 accounts, $73 million. 64% of NexTech's operating capital. Gone. I closed the laptop and tended to my orchids with the careful attention of someone with nothing but time. The plants were thriving, their purple blooms perfect and untouched by the chaos I'd just unleashed. My phone, deliberately left in the bedroom, began ringing. I could hear it through the monitor. Marcus's ringtone playing over and over. At 9:45, I drove to Tyler's college counseling appointment, making pleasant conversation with the counselor about early admission strategies, ensuring she would remember seeing me. Creating my alibi while NexTech Holdings discovered their foundation had been built on sand. The counselor's waiting room had a television playing CNBC. At 10:15, a breaking news alert flashed across the screen. NexTech Solutions stock halted pending major announcement. I smiled behind my magazine. My phone, now with me, showed 23 missed calls from Marcus. The voicemails escalated in tone with each message. The first confused. "Rebecca, something's wrong with the accounts. Call me." The 7th, angry, "What did you do?" The 15th, desperate, "Please, we can talk about this." The last, at 10:52, "I'm coming home. We need to talk." But I wouldn't be home. At 11:30, I walked into NexTech's lobby for what might be the last time. The scene was barely controlled chaos. Employees huddled in small groups, phones buzzing constantly, security guards looking confused about whether they should let people leave early. I took the executive elevator to the boardroom floor. Through the glass walls, I could see board members hunched over laptops, voices raised in urgent discussion, papers scattered across the usually pristine table. At the center of it all, Marcus gestured wildly at David Kim, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jessica sat in what should have been my chair, but her designer confidence had evaporated. She clutched her phone with both hands, mascara slightly smudged. Marcus saw me first. His entire body sagged with relief, and he rushed toward me. "Rebecca, thank God. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them you didn't mean to." I walked past him without acknowledgement, moving toward the head of the table where board chairman Wallace Harrison sat, rubbing his temples. The room fell silent as I positioned myself where everyone could see me. 64% of NexTech's funding came from my family's 18 accounts, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. I've withdrawn it all. The eruption was immediate. Board members shouting over each other, phones ringing, someone's laptop crashing to the floor. Through it all, Jessica's voice cut through with a question so naive it almost made me laugh. Can she even do that? Isn't that illegal? I turned to face her slowly, letting the full weight of my attention fall on her for the first time. Little girl, I said, my voice soft but carrying clearly. I built the ground you're standing on. The chair you're sitting in, the salary you thought you'd earned. Everything here exists because my family allowed it to exist. Wallace pounded his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Everyone, please. Mrs. Chen, we need to understand what's happening here. I connected my tablet to the presentation screen. The documentation appeared in devastating clarity. Wire transfers, account statements, the $73 million trail leading from Morrison Holdings to NexTech's accounts. Every major product launch, every market expansion, every crisis that Marcus had solved, funded by my family's money. Money he knew came from us, but reported to investors as diverse institutional funding. That's not, Marcus started, but Wallace cut him off with a sharp gesture. Is this accurate, David? Wallace asked our CFO. David straightened in his chair, his voice steady. Every word. I have the documentation to verify it. The board members exchanged glances, the reality of their situation sinking in. Without Morrison money, NexTech was essentially insolvent. What do you want? Wallace asked me directly. I had waited 10 years for this moment. My terms came out clear and non-negotiable. 1. Marcus resigns immediately. Not next month, not next week. Today. 2. Jessica Chen is terminated with cause. No severance, no references, no golden parachute. 3. I assume controlling interest with 51% voting shares and complete restructuring authority. The board lawyer started stuttering about precedent and corporate governance, but David interrupted him. She's offering to save the company, David said firmly. Without the Morrison money, we're bankrupt by Monday morning. Marcus's face had gone from red to white to an unhealthy gray. You can't seriously be considering this. I built this company. Wallace, who I knew played tennis with my mother every Sunday at the Peninsula Country Club, finally showed his cards. Mr. Chen, he said, his tone formal and final, you've lost the board's confidence. These are reasonable terms given the circumstances. Jessica stood abruptly, grabbing her designer bag. This is insane. I'm leaving. Stay, I commanded, and something in my voice made her freeze. Stay and watch what happens when you try to steal from a Morrison woman. Consider it a free education in consequences. She sank back into the chair, her face flushed with humiliation. The board voted within 15 minutes. Unanimous approval of all 3 terms. Marcus would resign. Jessica would be terminated. I would assume control. That evening, Marcus stumbled home at 11 p.m., looking like he'd aged 20 years in 12 hours. I was in his study, my study now, reviewing NexTech's restructuring plans that I'd been secretly developing for months. He stood in the doorway, swaying slightly. Not drunk, just destroyed. Rebecca, please. His voice cracked on my name. 10 years. 10 years has to mean something. Then, in a move I didn't expect, he dropped to his knees beside my chair, grabbing my hands before I could pull away. I made a mistake, he said, tears actually forming in his eyes. Jessica means nothing. She was just, you're my wife, Tyler's mother, the woman I married. I pulled my hands free and turned my laptop screen toward him. The real estate listings in Jessica's name filled the screen. The house in Menlo Park funded by his performance bonus. You were planning to leave anyway, I said. I just accelerated your timeline. His tears dried instantly, replaced by desperate calculation. I'll give you everything. The house, full custody of Tyler, my entire stake in NexTech. I'll resign quietly, disappear, never contact you again. For a moment, I considered it. A clean break. No public humiliation. But then I remembered the board meeting where he'd announced Jessica's promotion. Nothing personal. You'll resign publicly, I said. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. press conference where you take full responsibility for the financial mismanagement. You'll praise my leadership and recommend me as your successor. That will destroy my reputation. Yes, I agreed. It will. 3 months later, I stood at the head of NexTech's boardroom for our quarterly review. The same room where Marcus had announced Jessica's promotion felt different now. Lighter, more honest. The conference table had been replaced with a collaborative setup that seated everyone as equals. Marcus had preferred the hierarchical power dynamics of the old arrangement. David Kim, now my COO, presented genuinely profitable numbers for the first time in 2 years. No creative accounting, no hidden consulting fees, no mysterious expenses. Revenue is up 18%, David reported. Operating costs down 22% after eliminating redundant positions, suspicious consulting contracts. We've restored full transparency with all investors. My mother sat in the observer's chair, her presence both comforting and symbolic. She'd started attending board meetings after the restructuring, her experience invaluable in navigating the transition. "Your grandmother would be proud," she whispered, her hand briefly covering mine. "You didn't just save the company. You made it legitimate." The meeting concluded with unanimous approval of the quarterly results. As board members filed out, Wallace stopped beside me. "TechCrunch wants to do a feature," he said, "about the transformation. They're calling it the Morrison Renaissance." That afternoon, I found another manila envelope on my desk with familiar handwriting. Marcus's monthly letter. I'd been receiving them since he'd moved into his studio apartment in Soma, each one a testament to his unraveling. The first had been defiant, insisting I would regret the divorce, that no court would side with me. The third attempted negotiation. If I dropped the fraud investigation, he'd give up all claims to Tyler. The fifth was pure depression, written on hotel stationery after Jessica had left him for a blockchain entrepreneur she'd met in Austin. This latest one was different. Shorter, the handwriting steadier. "Rebecca, you were always the strong one. I see that now. I was just too arrogant to notice I was standing in your shadow, not casting my own." Marcus. I filed it with the others in the box marked evidence, feeling neither satisfaction nor sympathy. The opposite of love wasn't hate, it was indifference, and I had become beautifully indifferent to Marcus Chen. That evening, Tyler and I sat at our kitchen table working on his advanced calculus homework. He was applying to MIT early admission, following in my family's tradition of technical excellence. "Mom," he said, looking up from his laptop, "why did Dad choose someone else over us?" The question I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. I set down my coffee and considered my words carefully. Sometimes people get so caught up in what they think they want that they forget what they actually have. I said, "Your father forgot that real partnership isn't about who gets credit. It's about building something together." Caroline, who'd come for Sunday dinner and stayed to help Tyler with college applications, added her own wisdom. "Your mother didn't just take back money, Tyler," she said. "She took back her story. That's the real power." Tyler nodded solemnly, then his face brightened with the resilience of youth. "Can we get a dog now?" he asked. "Dad was always allergic, but now." Caroline and I burst into laughter, real, genuine laughter that filled our house for the first time in years. "Yes," I said. "We can get a dog." Later that week, Tyler and I visited the Humane Society and came home with a golden retriever named Tesla, Tyler's idea, a gentle mockery of his father's pretensions. Tesla took to the house immediately, claiming Marcus's former study as her favorite napping spot. It felt like poetic justice. The divorce finalized quietly. Marcus didn't contest it. He couldn't afford to, once the forensic accountants finished their review. He'd been siphoning funds for personal expenses, small amounts he thought wouldn't be noticed. Nothing criminal, but enough to forfeit any claim to alimony or shared assets. His LinkedIn profile now read, "Seeking new opportunities. Silicon Valley speak for unemployable." Word had spread through the industry about how NexTech had really been built. No one wanted to hire a man who'd stolen credit from his wife for 10 years. Jessica's story took a predictable turn. Her Instagram showed her reinventing herself as a lifestyle influencer in Los Angeles, posting motivational quotes about resilience and starting over. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was teaching lessons she'd learned the hard way about building a life on someone else's foundation. In my corner office, I kept exactly 2 photographs on my desk. The first showed 4 generations of Morrison women at the family estate the day after the board approved my leadership. My great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, and me, standing in the library where Mom had shown me those override provisions. 4 women who understood that real power wasn't given, but taken. The second photograph was framed differently, Marcus's resignation letter, handwritten on NexTech letterhead. Below it, I'd written in my own hand, "Never confuse access to power with actually possessing it." Every morning, I looked at both reminders of the journey from invisible benefactor to visible leader. Some days, young employees would ask about them during meetings. I would tell them the story, not as gossip, but as a lesson about knowing your worth, about documenting your contributions, about never letting anyone else narrate your story. NexTech stock had tripled under my leadership. We'd expanded into 5 new markets, hired 60 new employees based solely on merit, and established a scholarship program for women in STEM. TechCrunch had featured us as their comeback company of the year, though I preferred to think of it as a beginning, not a comeback. As I sat in my office one evening, watching the sunset paint the Bay Bridge gold, Tyler texted me a photo. He'd been accepted to MIT early admission with a full scholarship, his application essay about women who code the future, having impressed the admissions committee. His smile radiated pride, and beside him, Tesla wore a ridiculous congratulations bandana that Caroline had bought. This was success, not the hollow victories Marcus had chased, built on other people's efforts. This was real, earned, entirely ours. The Morrison fortune wasn't just preserved, it was finally in the hands of someone who understood its true value. Money had never been about luxury or status for our family. It was about independence, about the power to choose your own path, about ensuring that brilliant women never had to stand invisible behind mediocre men. I'd spent 10 years as Marcus's silent partner, invisible benefactor, the woman behind the man. Now I was simply Rebecca Morrison, CEO and architect of my own destiny. If this story resonated with you, hit that upvote button. My most satisfying moment was watching Marcus realize those 18 diverse investors were all my family's accounts. What was your favorite moment of justice? Share it in the comments below. Don't miss more stories of women reclaiming their power. Follow for more tales of triumph over betrayal.